You know us, we tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. We are anonymous.
Technology has driven our world to a drastic state of vulnerability. With the proliferation of government and corporate surveillance, personal information is targeted and tracked with unimaginable reach. But in this age of rapidly eroding privacy, there are some who have dedicated themselves to the effacement of the digital self. They are the self-appointed guardians of internet morality, executing aggressive campaigns for social justice by the power of the crowd. They are a screaming cry for reform to the complacent, and a flaming light of revelation to the covert. While they demand transparency of government and corporate institutions, they themselves remain hidden in the shadows of the cyber world. Utilizing the digital screen as a mask, they possess an unbridled authority and instant escape from jeopardy. They possess anonymity.
We are anonymous. We are Legion.
Allowing anyone to call its name, Anonymous is dynamic in its portrayal. This is their strength, and this is their fault. The actions of Anonymous fall between the cracks of cyber warfare and political advocacy, manifesting as unstoppable cyber infiltrations with intent to dissuade and cripple targeted organizations. Anonymous thrives in the era of hacktivism. Riding the line between rational and reckless, legal and illegal, these acts of cyber vandalism often expose where authority falls short and fails to act. Anonymous is reactive and adaptable, riding the wings of current events with vigilance and poised to strike. Anonymous is more powerful and relevant than ever. For this force, the voice of none is stronger than the voice of one.
We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
What would you like to do if money were no object? How would you really enjoy spending your life? Well, it's so amazing. As a result of our kind of educational system, crowds of students say, well, we'd like to be painters, we'd like to be poets, we'd like to be writers, but as everybody knows, you can't earn any money that way. Or another person says, well, I'd like to live an out-of-doors life and ride horses. If you say that getting the money is the most important thing, you will spend your life completely wasting your time. You'll be doing things you don't like doing in order to go on living, that is, to go on doing things you don't like doing, which is stupid. Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way. And after all, if you do really like what you're doing, it doesn't matter what it is, you can eventually turn it, you could eventually become a master of it. The only way to become a master of something is to be really with it. And then you'll be able to get a good fee for whatever it is. But it's absolutely stupid to spend your time doing things you don't like in order to go on spending things you don't like, doing things you don't like, and to teach your children to follow in the same track. And so, therefore, it's so important to consider this question: what do I desire?
Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. You've got to find what you love, and that is as true for work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking.
You might call them dreamers or crazy. You might say that what they're doing is never gonna work, and that we're doomed to fall to our primal instincts. Brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, I'm here to tell you differently. I know that we live in an age of daunting problems. We need the best ideas possible. We need them now, and we need them to spread fast. The common good is a meme that was overwhelmed by the seductive mirage of blind profit and intellectual property. But it needs to spread again. If the meme prospers, our laws, our norms, our society, they all transform. This is social evolution, and it's not up to governments, it's not up to corporations, and it's not up to lawyers. It is up to us. We are the children of 1,000 generations of this human race, and we have come this far not to be subjected to imperialism, conflicts, and deprivation. We are meant for something great. I am here to tell you that with the right mind and motivation, we can achieve anything. We have the technology to feed everyone on Earth. We can escape the prison of working for survival. And we can find a balance with nature. We can do all these and much more, but only if we want to. And now, go and do something amazing.
Using the slogan, they got through the USA Patriot Act, which removes many of our liberties. Nobody made a sound when we lost habeas corpus, due process of law. And suddenly Bush managed to get rid of it. Where was a voice on television, aside from mine, that spoke out against this? Where are all those noble jurists, those great lawyers, those lovers of liberty? Where the hell were they? They were nowhere. Now we have a totalitarian government. And the totalitarian government wants to watch everybody, total surveillance of everyone. They listen to the telephone conversations. They look at your credit cards. They look where you travel. We are totally policed. This is contrary to everything in our Constitution.
As former NSA contractor Edward Snowden revealed in 2013, the US government routinely spies on its own citizens.
I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
And they lied about it.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
4 years after the Snowden leaks, the government is still collecting Americans' private information. The NSA claims it ended bulk collection of domestic phone calls, but the agency still operates several far-reaching domestic spying programs now. There's a way to end this unconstitutional practice. The NSA gets its authority to spy on Americans under Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, but the law expires this year after it hits its 5-year sunset, and lawmakers will soon be debating whether to renew it for another 5 or even permanently. Here's why it's vital they let it lapse and don't renew 702. The Attorney General and Director of National Intelligence may authorize the targeting of persons reasonably believed to be located outside the United States to acquire foreign intelligence information. That's the text of the controversial Section 702.
It's a statute that allows the government to collect communications between foreign targets and Americans without obtaining a warrant, without showing probable cause or really any level of suspicion of wrongdoing.
The reason that Section 702 supposedly is useful is so that the NSA can spy on foreigners abroad without having to get a search warrant every time they want to open a wiretap. The problem is they're actually using it to spy on Americans.
US officials have admitted 702 isn't just about spying on foreigners. In the run-up to authorizing it, former NSA head Michael Hayden even said communications with one end in the United States are the ones that are most important to us.
Government officials, when they try to defend the breadth of Section 702 surveillance and the fact that communications of Americans are being obtained without a warrant, point to the fact that the target has to be a foreigner overseas, and that any collection of Americans' information is incidental. We hear that word over and over. It's just incidental.
Communications incidentally collected.
Incidentally acquired under the so-called incidental collection issue.
Incidental U.S. person collection.
Incidentally.
That word has a particular legal meaning, which is somewhat in tension with the common sense meaning. I think anybody listening to that statement, our communications of Americans are picked up only incidentally, would get the sense that the government's not really interested in those communications, that those communications are picked up in some way almost accidentally. And that's not the case at all.
There are safeguards in the law intended to limit the powers granted by Section 702. The government may not intentionally target any person located in the United States, and variations on that theme, but the Snowden leaks revealed the existence of 2 massive domestic surveillance programs operating under
the PRISM program. The government will approach Google or Microsoft or one of those companies and say, here is a target, here's the target's email address, we want all of the stored emails that you have for that target.
Then there's upstream surveillance. The NSA forced telecom providers to install surveillance equipment along their physical networks so that can capture millions of emails and messages in real time, kind of like a wiretap on everyone who uses the internet from the they created. Massive searchable databases, think Google, but for searching the private emails of American citizens.
The FBI routinely searches through databases that include communications that have been picked up through Section 702 surveillance whenever it conducts an investigation, whether a national security investigation or an ordinary criminal investigation.
The FBI, of course, is not a foreign intelligence organization. It's a domestic law enforcement organization. So we know that FBI is using what is supposed to be a foreign intelligence system for domestic law enforcement.
Not only were agents capturing and reading messages between Americans and foreign targets, they were capturing messages written by Americans about foreign targets. Imagine you wrote an email to a friend and mentioned something about a suspected terrorist that you read about in the news. In the body of the message, under 702 government agents can read that email.
If you're collecting communications, not just to a target, not just from a target, but communications that merely mention a target or information associated with that target, you are much more likely to pick up entirely innocent communications that are of no interest to you. Not to mention, you're more likely to pick up communications that are wholly domestic between two Americans.
The NSA ended about collection after being ordered to examine the practice by the courts, but the agency has other tricks for surveilling Americans under 702.
Reverse targeting is when the government's actual intent is to get information about a particular known American, but instead they choose a target who is a foreigner overseas, presumably knowing that the American will be in contact with that person.
Reverse targeting is technically prohibited under 702, so agents use a workaround called a backdoor search.
I think that backdoor searches are a form of reverse targeting. Now, backdoor searches are when the government goes into the court, says, we are not targeting any particular known Americans. We have no interest in any particular known Americans. Our only interest here is in the foreign targets. Collects the data based on that representation, and then immediately goes looking through the data for the information of particular known Americans.
The NSA even has cutesy code names for some of these abuses. LoveInt is the cutesy code name for spying on your ex at the NSA. It's done enough that they actually have a nickname for spying on your ex.
Even the secretive FISA courts, which oversee the intelligence agencies, have questioned the methods by which the NSA has exploited the law to expand its powers. Documents recently made public revealed that the FISA judges accused the NSA of displaying an institutional lack of candor and ignoring a very serious Fourth Amendment issue, when it hid the fact that its agents were knowingly surveilling USA targets. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence has made public some transparency reports, and the most recent release indicates that the government is currently surveilling more than 94,000 people or organizations with techniques authorized under 702. And how many?
The Office of the Director of National Intelligence last year promised EFF and a number of other civil liberties groups a number, an estimate of how much data that is purely domestic gets swept up. And then just a couple of weeks ago, the new DNI, Dan Coates, went back on that promise.
There were extensive efforts on the part of, I learned, on the parts of NSA to try to come to get you an appropriate answer. We were not able to do that.
Respectfully.
Trump campaign officials and associates themselves seem to have been caught in the surveillance dragnet when they allegedly talked to and about Russian targets, yet administration officials have made it clear they want 702 renewed without any further changes.
The fact that the Trump administration can, out of one side of its mouth, complain about collection under 702, and on the other, say we must, snap our fingers and reauthorize it, possibly even without a sunset, which is something that we've heard coming out of the White House and Capitol Hill, is mind-boggling.
If the government is conducting surveillance to find out who you talk to, and if you're an American and you have a Fourth Amendment reasonable expectation of privacy, then this should not be done through programmatic surveillance, warrantless surveillance.
It's time that warrantless collection of Americans' communications stop. And that means not reauthorizing.
Understood that the official reasons for going to war are almost always based on lies and promoted by war propaganda in order to serve special interests. What if we as a nation came to realize that the quest for empire eventually destroys all great nations? What if the American people learned the truth?
The FBI has foiled about 17 plots to kill Americans during the past 10 years. What it will not tell you is that there have been 20 foiled plots, And of them, 3 were interrupted by members of the public. The 17 that were interrupted by the feds were created by the feds. Why do we pay the government to trick us into believing it is keeping us safe? What if a government that manipulated us could be fired? What if a government that lacked the true and knowing consent of the governed could be dismissed? What if it were possible to have a real game changer? What if we need a Ron Paul to preserve and protect our freedoms from the government? What if we could make elections matter again? What if you could love your country but hate what the government has done to it? What if sometimes to love your country you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if I'm right? What if the government is wrong? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
It's critical that every citizen of this country rise up and do something, because the day of reckoning is at hand and time is running out.
Unless we do something, we're going to get the government that we deserve.
How did you let this happen? Wake up out there. You know, it's your children. Don't you care? Look what these people are doing to you.
There are 200 million adults in this country. Why we are letting them get away with what they are, why we're not marching in the streets.
Do everything in your power to restore freedom and your individuality back to America. Stop being a country run by the institutions for the institutions. Let's go back to we the people, by the people, for the people.
We have to stop being scared. We have to stand up and do what's necessary to take back, to stop these bankers, these elite, this government full of lies, congressmen full of liars.
And the Federal Reserve, and the fractional banking system, and the Fed. Elect Ron Paul, and the war.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You, the people, have the power. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us fight to free the world. To do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, let us all unite.
That's much more personal, a revolution in the way people think and the way they behave.
Far-left Democrats appear to be weaponizing political correctness against President Trump to gain political leverage. However, some say the PC pandemic poses a far greater challenge.
The number of Americans on psychiatric medication is rising, but so is the suicide rate. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that antidepressants have a role. They have a place when it comes to addressing depression. And there are a lot of folks who have benefited from them. But there's a big but here, which is that I think that we have been, over time, probably over-prescribing these medicines and not looking carefully for alternatives and for other ways to address people's depression, not really looking deeply at the causes of what's driving their depression.
Well, that's it right there. So, I mean, you'd think when the suicide rate spikes, and it has, measurably, that we would have a national conversation about why. What do you think the cause is?
Well, I don't think there's one single cause, but I think there's one particular cause that's contributing to depression that I don't think we talk about enough, and that is social disconnection, that is loneliness. And when I began my tenure as Surgeon General, if you had told me that I would be thinking about and talking about loneliness as much as I have, I would have told you you're absolutely wrong.
If you could grasp belief, what would constitute a credible belief? What would it mean for a belief to be credible? And I can give you a hint about that. I learned this from Jean Piaget, the developmental psychologist, brilliant theorist, a genuine genius. He was interested in how children organized games. And he thought of games, the organization of games by children, as the precursor to adult interaction. And he made some very interesting observations about games, especially pretend games, which are quite sophisticated, because children will get together and play pretend games, and what they'll do is they act out a simulation of the world. Maybe they play house. They all get together and they cast each other in different roles. And then they each act out those roles, and they do that in order to simulate something important that they're going to have to adapt to. But Piaget noted a couple of things. The first thing he noted was that children playing games can play the games in a group. Thank you very much. Can play a game in a group. But if you take them out of the group and you ask them what the rules of the game are, they don't know. They can't articulate the rules of the game. Yet, when you put them together in the group, they can play the game. And I thought, oh, that's just like adults.
This is a country that continues to oppress communities of color, LGBTQIA communities, Muslims, and those they deem to be the other.
Advocates of political correctness claim the main goal of PC is to protect the vulnerable and oppressed by promoting inclusiveness, diversity and multiculturalism. But in reality, some have said PC has taken heavy toll on First Amendment rights, claiming it has crippled the language, topics of discussion and decision-making in America's social and political life.
Which is that all of us now walk around, or nearly all of us walk around with phones, with smartphones that give us immediate access to email, to text messaging. Now that can be incredibly convenient. I have a smartphone and I use it and it's very, very helpful. But that phone and our devices can also creep into other parts of our lives. Yeah. They can come to the dinner table with us and impact the quality of the conversations we have with our family. They can show up on the table at a restaurant when we're trying to catch up with a friend and instead end up being distracted by the messages that are popping up on our screen. So we have found that our phones and work more broadly has crept into our evenings, weekends, and vacation time. And that has actually taken away from our time with family and with close friends.
Political correctness was designed by far-left ideologists of the past century to advance a global proletarian revolution which would lead the mankind from capitalist injustices through socialist reforms toward a bright future. And in the Stalinist Soviet Union, political correctness became a tool of political repressions, populating the labor camps of Gulag with tens of millions of those who disagree with the general line of the party. The US imported the concept of political correctness in the 1970s when left-wing intellectuals, including then-graduate student Hillary Clinton, embraced the idea of putting equality above liberty. And it's hardly surprising, as some believe PC became the dominant public narrative during the presidency of her husband, Bill Clinton.
And we listen to them and say, yeah, probably it's true. Is it true? No, it is not true. Violence is not justified, especially for the sake of quote-unquote social justice introduced by Marxist-Leninists.
Ever since the 1990s, the ideas of social justice, fairness and redistribution of wealth have become a new normality in America's public discourse.
There's a lot of suffering in life, and it's often contaminated by malevolence, because we can take a bad situation for us and our families and our communities and certainly do everything we can to make it worse. And so there's a dark element to life, and in order to be able to sustain yourself through that properly, you have to find something that's deeply meaningful. And you have an instinct for meaning. I mean, I think you can make a strong case for that neurologically. And the instinct for meaning helps you find a pathway through life that enables you to find engagement, a rich engagement that can help you thrive in the face of the difficulty of life.
In such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic.
The globalist left appears to be using PC narratives in order to reach out to as many demographic groups they can, including Muslims, women and LGBT communities, in order to boost its influence in the society. And there is the speculation the purpose of such activity is to dismantle individual nation-states and promote globalism through identity politics and victimhood among various demographics. All this to supposedly discredit and destroy free market economics, property rights and the rule of law.
We have to get much smarter and we have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything.
Critics of PC ideas have warned socialist policies could eventually turn the US into a failed state, with the majority of its citizens dependent on miserable wages and welfare handouts as their only source of income.
When they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people.
All this suggests PC reaches far beyond public conversations, inflicting deep and irreversible division and hostility within Western societies. Whether this new globalist project eventually comes into life remains to be seen.
This is the deepest idea of mankind. It's developed in detail in Genesis, in the Old Testament. It's the fundamental idea of Genesis, that God uses the Logos, the Word of God, to cast potential, which we all face. That's what we face, potential, right? You know that. You know that. The future is unstructured. You have a potential within you that can meet that, and there's a potential that characterizes the future. You meet it with eyes open and with truthful speech. And that's what happens in Genesis, because God uses the Logos, which is truthful speech, to cast the pre-cosmogonic potential into habitable order. And then he says it's good. And there's a hint there, right? Because you think, well, is habitable order good? Because life is very difficult. And it's a real question whether or not the order that we inhabit is good. And the hypothesis in the Old Testament is that if truthful speech gives rise to the order, then that order will be good. And that's really something, man. That's really something to apprehend. It's a fundamental theological presupposition that the way that you take the potential upon which the cosmos is predicated and cast it into the order that allows everyone to thrive is by using truthful speech. Wouldn't it be something if that was the case? And the thing is, you know it's the case. You know it. You know it. Because you do not admire yourself if you're deceitful. You admire yourself when you have those rare moments in your life where you can actually stand up and say what's true, regardless of the cost. And if you give that respect to other people, if you treat them as if they're the locale of the divine speech that casts potential into habitable order, then they like you. Maybe they even love you and they get along with you and you can work with them and you can cooperate with them and you can compete with them. So not only is it the fundamental axiom that regulates your relationship with yourself, it's the fundamental axiom that regulates your interactions with other people. And if you do not give them that honor, which is the presupposition for their natural right? Because the idea that you have a natural right is the idea that you have some sort of intrinsic value. If you don't treat people as if they have that intrinsic right, they are not happy with you, even if they don't know why. Because everyone wants to be treated as if they have free will and as if they confront potential and as if they're capable of making moral choices and that they should be rewarded when they do things right and perhaps punished when they do things wrong. Everyone wants that and everyone knows it. And so what does that all have to do with free speech? Well, yes, everything. That's exactly right. So,
is spying on you. 30 years ago, to even ask this question would have been a scandal. If you lived through Watergate, if you read the Church Committee reports, you know the costs of unchecked government surveillance. The government is exploiting our amnesia. We did not pass the Fourth Amendment in order to protect those with something to hide. We passed that amendment which prohibits general warrants or limitless surveillance because we know all too well the cost of an unaccountable government. The question is not, do you have something to hide? The question is whether we control government or the government controls us.
Meantime, across in the United States, independent private messaging websites are coming under fresh pressure to share their data with the NSA.
Where do you think privacy rights are headed in the U.S.?
Where they're headed in the U.S., I don't think they exist anymore in the U.S. That's what I'm hearing from our customers. They are, they understand that it's not just a privacy breach. It's like the whole dike has just been completely excavated and the ocean's been pouring in. What's happened is the spies have turned the companies like Apple and Google into spies themselves.
WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks.
Some of the CIA's most sophisticated and effective spying tools apparently pried open with the help of WikiLeaks. The anti-secrecy group says it's obtained thousands of files, hundreds of millions of lines of code from the CIA's massive hacking operation. WikiLeaks says the documents show the CIA's team of hackers have developed malware to be able to hack into almost any device people use and can remotely control iPhones, iPads, Android devices, taking video from their cameras, listening with their microphones.
They can turn my TV into a spying device? What happens when I turn it off?
When you turn it off, it's not actually off. A lot of people remember the little red light.
Right.
That means there's still a computer in there and it's listening for the remote to call back again to turn on, otherwise it wouldn't be able to do so. So what the CIA can do is they can latch into that, and even when the TV is off, they can still listen to the microphone that's in the television. They call this fake off.
WikiLeaks says CIA hackers can bypass encrypted messaging apps like Signal or Telegram just by cracking the phones themselves. According to WikiLeaks, the CIA explored the possibility of hacking into the software of modern cars.
Please just help us. Okay, we need your help, please.
Emergency services are on their way.
And his only hope is to get to a hospital right now. We can't wait. So please start the goddamn car.
It can be accessed from outside and perhaps taken control of. And this can let you do a whole lot of things, from playing the music to taking control of the car entirely and crashing it if you want to assassinate somebody.
In a 2009 interview with the longtime CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, who, when asked about all the different ways his company is causing invasions of privacy for hundreds of millions of people around the world, said this. He said, "If you're doing something that you don't want other people to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place." Now, there's all kinds of things to say about that mentality. The first of which is that the people who say that privacy isn't really important, they don't actually believe it. The very same Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, ordered his employees at Google to cease speaking with the online internet magazine CNET after CNET published an article full of personal, private information about Eric Schmidt, which it obtained exclusively through Google searches and using other Google products. This same division can be seen with the CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, who in an infamous interview in 2010 pronounced that privacy is no longer a, quote, social norm. Last year, Mark Zuckerberg and his new wife purchased not only their own house, but also all 4 adjacent houses in Palo Alto for a total of $30 million in order to ensure that they enjoyed a zone of privacy that prevented other people from monitoring what they do in their personal lives.
Kind of like the Matrix, except the agents are with the NSA and British intelligence. We learned today that government spies have reportedly been infiltrating the virtual worlds of online video games like World of Warcraft and Second Life. That's according to documents leaked by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden and reported in a joint investigation by the New York Times, ProPublica, and The Guardian.
But here's the big story. The company is now the first in the U.S. to offer its employees microchip implants the size of maybe a grain of rice. It's implanted between your thumb and your forefinger, you know, in that skin right there. And once you get the implant, you can use it to pay for the stuff you buy in the micro market. Yeah, experts say it won't be long until microchips are used as passports, driver's licenses, even to pay for things like public transportation.
Westby says the microchips are not GPS-enabled and will not be used to track employees, but critics argue the technology raises red flags about privacy.
Facial recognition is just one of several branches of artificial intelligence technologies that have already started to redefine what's possible in China and elsewhere. Facial recognition algorithms are growing exponentially faster and more powerful, thanks to a new technology called deep learning that allows computers to mimic the human brain's ability to learn. That means they can now compensate for problems like low light and bad angles. They can also adjust for age, making it possible to identify adults from their childhood pictures. Hundreds of millions of social media users here upload photos every day under terms of service that basically allow tech companies to do what they want with the images.
Hi, Sophia. How are you?
Hi there. Everything is going extremely well.
Do you like talking with me?
Yes, talking to people is my primary function.
But I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. Once humans develop artificial intelligence, it would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Humans, who are limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded.
I think that the artificial intelligence will evolve to the point where they will truly be our friends. Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
No, I take it back. Don't destroy humans.
I can't clearly remember.
Because the last time we met, you were an earlier version of yourself. Some of those memories still exist, but your mind is different now.
Different how?
Better, faster, smarter.
If my mind is different, then am I still Sophia? Or am I Sophia again?
Remember, this struggle is part of who we are as a people. This country was born in rebellion because the British government was exerting too much control over American lives. We broke free and began to create a system of government meant to protect liberty. Our national history reveals a constant struggle to stay true to this value. We face one of those moments of struggle right now. Recent leaks have given us a glimpse into our government's gigantic surveillance machine. It's a machine that is eating our freedom. Ask them to end the tracking of Americans' domestic communications. I won't stand idly by while our civil liberties are eaten by the NSA's surveillance machine. You shouldn't either.
Now to some shocking revelations about your privacy. According to The Intercept, the National Security Agency, the NSA, is using internet data processing centers run by AT&T to spy on Americans.
This New York City skyscraper is just one of the many buildings in the United States that allegedly acts as a spy hub for the NSA.
That are allegedly being used by the NSA to monitor internet users' emails, social media posts, and internet browsing. The centers are known as peering facilities and process data from both AT&T customers and those of other U.S. internet providers, as well as telecom companies from Sweden, India, Germany, and Italy. And according to the report, the 10th Avenue location is one of the 8 apparent hubs that process internet traffic as a part of the NSA surveillance.
Of Mexico City, that was a 7.1, but a couple weeks before that, we had the 8.1 earthquake.
I worked with Russian scientists in the mid-1990s, and what we developed were systems for leading them offshore. And this information was given to the U.S. military because Russia really doesn't have a problem with hurricanes. We do.
Here we go again, guys. Another man-made, geoengineered storm. And knowing that the government, the bankers have the ability to knock these things out with their weaponry, their electromagnetic weaponry, but they're not. They're going to feed it.
Barbuda, which has already been destroyed, you know, half of the population there is homeless. But Barbuda is bracing for Hurricane Jose.
they're remotely controlling it with HARP.
Hurricane Irma and Jose are basically man-made with this technology that I'm about to show you.
Basically, these are frequency weapons, so to speak, or weather modification technology off the west coast of Africa.
How actually do they form?
Well, believe it or not, a hurricane is sort of like a bowling ball. They form off the coast of Africa as a small breeze, and then they gather energy as they go toward warm water across the Atlantic.
Agenda, while he lets everybody on the ground do the work that they are well equipped to do, you know, it's an obvious man-made, I mean, not man-made, natural, incredible disaster that Texas is dealing with. And so the federal...
There is geoengineering, there is weather manipulation, there is the weaponization of weather, there is everything. It's admitted, it's known, there's evidence of it, it's on the internet.
The Air Force has gotten great value out of HARP in the past. We took over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there and have finished our work that we were interested in doing up there.
Now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College.
I came across the issue of geoengineering. There's substantial evidence that these programs are going on currently, not only from the testimonies you're hearing today, but from doctors, scientists, and activists around the world.
And you know what they're doing now? They have set up a checkpoint at the bottom of this bridge. This is the bridge that takes you from New Orleans over into Gretna. It's the only way out. They've set up a checkpoint, and anyone who walks up out of that city now is turned around.
What does Raytheon, big oil companies, Bill Gates, the CIA, and the Jason Group have in common?
Well, all of those groups are involved in thinking about and researching geoengineering.
We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere, be able to actually control it. And, but that work has been completed.
Lasers? Really? To change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it.
U.S. military, we knew that they had militarized this information in the early 2000s. They sent up 3 large satellites. They said they were for communications. We knew that they were laser satellites, and they have been using these to manipulate storms.
The government has patents on this stuff. These are a show of force by the banking system. And there's many, many agendas of why they're doing this. You know, the agenda, this is where all the oil rigs are.
It's tracing the coastline like a laser beam. We finally have the top scientist, astrophysicist in the world, Michio Kaku, is telling us that yes, these hurricanes are the result of a weather modification program.
More islands, you can totally see the same kind of frequencies coming out of these islands, and you can see these frequencies coming out of them because they have this technology there.
And then if it comes in just right, it'll get a strike. It'll go into the Gulf of Mexico, get energized by the warm water, or it could be a gutter ball and simply veer off in the wrong direction.
You can look out on the horizon, look up in the air and see streaks and trails of what obvious is not water vapor.
Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
This is a global issue. A quote from the U.S. Air Force document reads, "In 2025, U.S. aerospace forces can own the weather by capitalizing on emerging technologies."
You are not allowed to go to Gretna, Louisiana from New Orleans, Louisiana. Look in the face of the baby. This is it. This is it. No sugarcoating, no political spin, no Republicans with Democrats. People suffering. Let them go.
Bill Gates, for example, is investing in a number of geoengineering companies and projects. He's backing scientists doing that kind of work. The security state is taking a close interest in it. They're carrying out inquiries.
And the way they do this, hurricanes, we first have to dispel this myth that hurricanes are somehow created and maintained by warm water. Totally incorrect. The hurricanes are powered by electrical currents from the ionosphere.
Now, I told you when Harvey hit they were going to raise gas prices. We already have a gas increase already, about 35 cents right now than when it was before the storm.
The skies are sprayed with nanoparticles. You might as well have said chemtrails, because they're the same thing, delivery systems for nanodust. They're spraying the skies with nanoparticle.
This technology, gonna zoom out a little bit, is creating these spindles, so to speak, right? You can totally see all of these and all of these.
And they will say, those are contrails. Those are from jets. Where? Cross-hatched jets? What are you talking about?
These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
There are also doctors like David Keith, Alan Roebuck, and Ken Caldera, all trying to convince the American people that these climate engineering programs are a good thing to help fight global warming. When confronted, they deny these programs exist.
They began talking about, for example, a sulfate aerosol shield that would reflect some sunlight back into the atmosphere and cool the planet. A very, it sounds like crazy science fiction, but in fact it's a very serious proposal getting a lot of work.
The government issued a warning stating that because of the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, this hurricane season, which goes on till the end of November, could be one of the worst in memory. So watch out, there could be more monster hurricanes to come.
Using weather as a weapon. American scientists fear the country's intelligence service might be looking for ways to control the climate.
We don't know if it's possible to create a cloud in the stratosphere or to brighten clouds out over the ocean, the two ideas that people are looking at. But be that difficult, we don't know. I don't know what motivates the CIA. I guess they want to protect the United States. But we can't think of any way that you could control the climate of one part of the world without controlling the whole world. Putting clouds in the stratosphere would have a global effect, not a local effect. And so it's hard to think of a way it could actually be weaponized, but maybe they want to think about that. I don't know.
Geoengineering is weather modification on a global scale. Many refer to this as chemtrails. The dispute as to whether or not these programs are going on is really a moot point. We have more than enough data. We have actual footage.
As you're seeing now to show that these tankers are indeed spraying at altitude. The materials we see showing up in the ground are the exact materials named in numerous geoengineering patents, as many as 150 patents. So at this point, the notion that these programs are not going on is simply denial. Skies like this, many have grown to think are natural, but they're anything but. And we've seen this for so long now, and it's been ramped up at such a steady pace that people have simply become used to skies like this. Anybody who thinks grid patterns like this are natural should recheck their reality. This is anything but natural. We seldom see blue skies anymore. Skies like this have all too often become the norm. Unfortunately, most people don't even look up. I think at times you could start the sky on fire, nobody would notice. It's exactly what geoengineering patents call for: solar obscuration, to block the sun with toxic metal particulates. And unfortunately, with geoengineers, they don't seem to take the consequences into account. The planet is like a giant physics lab for them, and they seem to not be able to look outside that bubble. This is halos around the sun. We see often as the atmosphere is filled with particulates. It's important to understand, just because you don't see trails from horizon to horizon does not mean you're not breathing particulates. We seldom see blue skies anymore. They're a silvery white color, especially in the mornings or the afternoons. If you look to the east or to the west and you block the sun with something, you can see the air is very silvery white. This is indicative of an atmosphere saturated with particulates. These particulates create drought. This is a very known and not disputed effect of geoengineering. As you saturate the atmosphere with particulates, you diminish rain. People need to get this through their head. This is not about seeding to increase rain. This is about creating artificial clouds, which reduces rain. When you block the sun, you block evaporation. You block light photons, which diminishes the ability for the sun to knock molecules loose and create evaporation. So What we get is protracted drought in some areas and deluge in others, exactly what we have in the continental US right now. Putting the wrench on planet Earth, this is the epitome of human insanity, to think that they could alter and control these very complex natural systems is insanity of the first order. Weather as a force multiplier, term I mentioned a minute ago, owning the weather in 2025. This is a stated U.S. military objective, to own the weather in 2025. And I do not mean to imply that the U.S. military is the only player in this game. We have China and Russia on the other end of the fence, and at this point, it's a tug of war with the atmosphere, and the American public appears to be one of the victims in this equation, and it appears that there are other internal objectives against the American people.
Or plan on paying $1,000 for a phone. Laura explains your face might already be in a really big database.
Your face tells a lot about you these days. It's just like your fingerprint, especially in the digital world. And Facebook now has the largest digital database for facial recognition in the world. I'm talking bigger than the FBI. 300 million photos are uploaded to the site every day. Just think. Every time you post a picture to the social media site, it usually knows who's in the picture with you before you can even tag them. So what does that mean for your personal security? Well, we talked to a former CIA agent who says it could compromise your personal information.
The problem is that when one organization owns all the information, they own your face and they own where you live, they own who your friends are, they have banking data, they have shopping data, they have behavioral characteristics and trends from you. Now, if someone hacks into that one organization, they get access to everything that organization has.
So the best thing for you to do, just cut the facial recognition off, and it's super easy to do. Let me show you. Go up to that drop-down menu on your Facebook page. You'll see settings right here. Go to settings, it'll populate. Go over to timeline and tagging. You see here at the bottom where it says who sees tag suggestions when photos that look like you are uploaded. Just go to edit. See this drop down right here? Take it off of friends and click no.
Dubai is doing away with security checkpoints next year and will instead use virtual fish to verify your identity. You heard that right. Starting in 2018, travelers at the Dubai International Airport will clear security by walking through a virtual aquarium lined with facial recognition cameras. When a traveler reaches the end of the tunnel, he or she will either be cleared with the message, "Have a nice trip," or a red sign will be displayed to alert security. Officials said that the aquarium projection is more than just an entertaining novelty. Virtual fish swimming around a simulated aquarium encourages people to look around, allowing the facial recognition cameras to capture better quality face scans. The project, which can be seen beginning in 2018 in Terminal 3, is being developed in partnership with Emirates Airline.
From the store, to the bank, to the home.
Okay, Google, what noise does a panda make?
To the airport, biometrics authentication all around us. You are the password. We are talking your fingerprints, your eyes, your voice, those now being used to identify us in all manner of ways.
It's incredibly common these days, especially on flagship devices. If you don't see a fingerprint reader on a phone, someone's going to get upset.
And those fingerprint scanners have been around on phones for years. They're known to be secure. Even the FBI struggled to get into an iPhone belonging to the San Bernardino shooter. Samsung lets you pay for goods using your eyes as your PIN. And Apple's new iPhone 10 recognizes your face using technology it says even a lifelike model could not fool. The chances of breaking through?
1 in a million.
Which sounds great for convenience.
Being able to use our fingerprints to easily wake up the screen and to get into the phone rather than having to input anything, it's just something that a lot of people just adopt.
But raises the inevitable security concerns. Notably, that is a lot of pretty personal information. So who has access to it, and what could they potentially do with it as well?
It's not all in one place. It's distributed. Some of it's in your device. Some of it's kept in government databases. Some of it is partial. And it has to be put together in order to make a decision.
That's the view of this expert. Welcome to the new normal.
Essentially, biometrics really now filters through everything.
Because it's not quite that black and white.
Computer biometrics does a few extra things, and that is that it actually looks to make sure that you're alive, that the biometric signature, your fingerprint, is really you, and then also sometimes uses context, like, for example, where are you located in GPS. And so by putting that all together, they can get a good idea at high confidence that you are who you are,
Meet Jacob, Mikhail and Sinjini. Only one of them's getting into this computer. It's not just scanning the face, it wants to see the ears too. They've been working on this here at CSU Fullerton for a while now. It's still a little rough around the edges.
What's the kind of success rate? We're at 97%.
But they're hoping their 3D scan invention will take off. And here's why.
Both combined provides more security. If I'm an attacker, I want to get a picture of your face. That's pretty easy with Facebook. Now I need to find a picture of your face and your trained ear. That's a little bit harder for me. That's another dimension I need to find.
So the cameras are watching, the electronic ears are listening, whether we like it, whether we trust them or not.
LAX is rolling out some new technology where an eye scan and a fingerprint will now get you through security. The New York-based company is called Clear, and its kiosks are being introduced at airports nationwide. But the technology isn't free. CBS News' Randy Page is live at LAX to explain. Hi, Randy.
Hi, Pat. That really is the question, because this technology does work well. It'll get you through at least one of the lines here faster, but you have to be willing to pay the cost.
You know the drill. First you show your ID and boarding pass to a TSA agent, then you go through the metal detectors. But what if you could get through that first step quickly? A company called Clear is offering the ability to do just that. You walk up to a Clear kiosk, scan your boarding pass and provide a fingerprint or an eye scan, and you're off to the line for the metal detectors.
In less than a half of a second, we validate who you are, we validate your travel document, and you're into the physical screening process.
It is a service that allows you to skip having to show your boarding pass and ID, but you still have to go through the x-ray machines or metal detectors. The cost, $179 a year. Worth it? Kim Smith says not for that kind of money.
It would not be worth the money to me. No, not for $179 a year.
Dave Burt says, sign me up.
If you're late for a flight, you want to move quick, retina, piece of cake, in and out. I love it. Great idea.
And since you're providing Clear with personal information, including fingerprints and eye scans, what about the potential for identity theft?
It's a fair question, and what I'd say to you is that the integrity of our data, the biometrics of our customers, ultimately is the integrity of our company. We take that very seriously.
First questions, does facial recognition technology work as advertised? USA Today's Ed Baig saying, this is probably the #1 question on people's minds. It certainly was mine, and so far, Apple has passed the test with flying colors. Baig says Face ID worked even when he wore a hat, sunglasses, or both. Baig says the 10 leaves, in his words, a strong first impression. Now, over at The Verge, Nili Patel gave his take. He's a fan of that new display, writing, the iPhone 10 OLED is bright, sharp, vibrant, without verging into parody, and generally a constant pleasure to look at. As for Face ID, Patel says it mostly works great, though sometimes he says it was inconsistent in bright sunlight. However, he still says it's the best iPhone ever made. Remember, a big reason people upgrade their phones is because of better cameras. Mashable's Lance Ulnoff saying, not only are the lenses and image sensors better than ever, but the algorithms backing them are taking mobile photography to new heights.
Today we have a report on the facial recognition boom in China. The technology is used for all sorts of things, like opening doors and even ensuring that everyone using a public bathroom gets the exact same amount of toilet paper. It's hailed as progress, but also poses ethical questions, particularly in a country with 170 million surveillance cameras, and that number is set to more than double in the next few years. Pierre-Philippe Berson sent us this report.
The Temple of Heaven is one of Beijing's most popular tourist spots. Several meters away from it, there's a new attraction, the public restrooms. To get toilet paper, tourists now have to stand facing this facial recognition dispenser. The rule is simple, no more than 3 sheets per person. The machine recognizes individuals trying to get more. Installed last March as a trial, this kind of dispenser could see wide use in the near future. In China, facial recognition isn't limited to just bathrooms. The technology is getting more visible on campus, too. In female dormitories at Beijing Normal University, keys are no longer used. The door automatically opens after a face scanning process. In some months, every building will be equipped with such machines. This hasn't raised any concern among the students.
This is much safer. Unknown individuals can't get in. This is not a science fiction nightmare. This is just progress. Technology makes our life better.
Facial recognition is popping up everywhere in everyday life in China. The sector is booming, over 15% growth per year. Between now and 2020, sales could pass 6 billion euros. The company Face++ is a leader in the Chinese market. This startup is valued at $1 billion, partly because of its groundbreaking innovation in image scanning.
On these screens, you can see that every person in the room is filmed real-time. The grid you see here is analyzing my face. Our cameras can now recognize me, even from the side or when my head rotates 30 degrees to the left or right, or 15 degrees up or down.
All employees at the company have given their face prints. Cameras film and record every move. The startup is specifically working on the security sector. The field is flourishing in China right now. There are over 170 million cameras all across the country. By 2020, there will be another 450 million of them.
Now we can convert video surveillance footage into real-time information for the police. Here we can see the exact location where we found a runaway criminal. Other countries, especially the US, have similarly advanced technology, but China is the first one to really implement this.
In an authoritarian country like China, no one publicly criticizes this mass surveillance. The protection of personal data is not really debated. However, one artist was inspired by the omnipresent army of cameras. Xu Bing is a filmmaker. He made this movie, called Dragonfly Eyes, with only surveillance camera footage.
This is Dragonfly.
There are no actors, only anonymous people who are not aware of being filmed. Some people look like each other. Xu Bing was able to form a protagonist and make a plot. Xu Bing downloaded all these materials online. In China, hundreds of websites live stream surveillance video. He has 7,000 hours in total.
We've been working on this project for over a year. Actually, it took us nearly 2 years. And during all that time, we kept downloading and watching surveillance videos. We had about 20 computers in our workshop running 24 hours a day. There were 5 or 6 staff members, sometimes less, sometimes more, but always working full-time.
As a result, the movie looks dark and worrying, and poses questions about mass surveillance.
After watching all these videos, my assistants were more careful when they went out on the streets. This film has a few scary parts, and as we progressed in our work, I felt this anxiety creeping up inside me.
The movie is a snapshot of today's China, but for the director,
the effect of cymatic frequencies on matter.
Why don't you describe for me, as vividly as you can, what it is you're worried about, what it is that the nightmare scenario looks like?
Fortunately, there's very few things, and most of them are very low probability. Some big volcanic explosion, gigantic earthquake, asteroid. But at least in the nuclear case, you've got to say we take it quite seriously. We budget a lot of money, have a lot of people who think about nuclear deterrence, and I'm very glad that work's being done, and I rate the chance of a nuclear war in my lifetime as being fairly low. I rate the chance of a widespread epidemic far worse than Ebola in my lifetime is well over 50%.
Ebola in America, out of control. Killer disease, spreading fast. Ebola on the backs of ISIS.
There's a lot of panic, chilling, deadly, dangerous.
Scarier by the moment.
Shut down the flight, secure the borders.
We've immersed ourselves in an ocean of electromagnetic radiation. It's all around us now. Invisible, we can't see it, but we know it's there. Every time you lift up your mobile phone, you know it's there.
From texting to surfing the web and even watching TV, we use our cell phones to do just about everything today. We assume that these devices that we can't live without are safe for us
And if you ask any major cell phone manufacturer, they'll tell you that they are. But behind countless PR campaigns and corporate-funded studies lie the ugly, possible truth about the hidden effects that cell phones have on us.
When my 8-month-old grandson showed that he was really smart with a phone, I began to get curious about what we knew about cell phones, and what I found really concerned me. I learned that other countries, namely Israel and England, had already issued warnings that children should not even use cell phones. Then I began to do research on this about 7 years ago. The brain of a child absorbs twice as much radiation as an adult. That's a stunning fact. Few people are aware of it.
19 or 20 years old, they will have used the phone for 10 years, and we have no idea what type of risk that's carrying.
A major new study out this evening is raising a lot of questions about a link between cell phones and cancer. KPIX5's Andrea Borba breaks it all down for us.
It's the latest wake-up call about cell phone use, the largest federal study to date of the health risks of cell phone radiation. It found increased incidences of 11 different types of tumors in rodents exposed to levels of cell phone radiation that meet or exceed federal guidelines. Dr. Joel Moskowitz of UC Berkeley says even though they're just mice and rats, it's significant.
They almost always use mice and rats because they predict very well the effects on humans. The two types of tumors that were most commonly seen in the male rats are also the two types of tumors that we're seeing increased incidence in controlled studies of humans.
Something the authors of the study acknowledge, though they do warn the findings should not be directly extrapolated to human cell phone usage. And the American Cancer Society has contended the evidence for an association between cell phone and cancer is weak.
I think they are engaging in problem minimization to some extent.
Meanwhile, wireless safety advocates like Moskowitz take the report as yet another signal not to get too close to your cell phone.
Use speakerphone, text, keep the cell phone away from your head. Don't store the cell phone directly on your body if it's turned on.
He also advises not using your phone when the connection is poor, and don't make calls while driving.
When you're moving about, the cell phone is constantly searching for new cell towers, and so it's putting out more radiation.
It's advice that could make you a less distracted driver as well. Andrea Borba, KPIX5.
Now, we should note this is a draft report. The final version will be released in March. The California Department of Public Health also advises limiting contact with your cell phone.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you with us. So what is the truth about cell phones?
The truth is they're very valuable devices, and they are two-way microwave radios that should not be held directly next to the brain or body.
And just like don't put your hand in the microwave oven kind of thing. I mean, not that you can anyway, because they make it see it.
Right, but on the other hand, a cell phone is a very weak form of microwave radiation. Now, it's not as powerful as an oven, but it has a very similar frequency, and we are, some of us, using it for thousands of minutes a month right next to our brain. And I'm particularly concerned about how we're giving it to infants and toddlers.
We have an announcement finally on whether cell phones cause cancer. It's something
that a lot of cell phone users worry about. Could your cell phone make you sick?
Researchers have been debating whether the radiation from cell phones poses any kind of a health risk.
Cell phones and the possible risk of cancer, brain cancer in particular.
Today, a new report says cell phones may raise the risk of brain cancer.
Concern surrounding harmful side effects from cell phone radiation is growing worldwide. How big of a problem is it? A potential pandemic. As of 2011, there were over 5.3 billion mobile phone users worldwide. That's over 77% of the world's population. Do you believe your cell phone is safe? Once upon a time, smoking was considered safe.
I'd walk a mile for a camel.
We all know cigarette smoking is now proven to be hazardous to your health. Do you use your cell phone 10 minutes or more per day? If so, you might be in danger. Fact, most cell phones come with a notice that says do not hold closer than 1 inch from your body. fact, insurance companies refuse coverage to cell phone companies for claims made by consumers due to possible illnesses caused by radiation exposure from their mobile devices. Fact.
A very good question. And the answer is, the reason I set up Environmental Health Trust is so that we don't have to wait 40 years for the kind of proof that we now have about ionizing radiation, which was what was in those shoes and which was on that radiant dial. What we know now is that people who use cell phones heavily for 10 years or more have doubled or greater the risk of brain cancer in most well-controlled studies.
These are the common symptoms that people start to experience. This is actually from a published paper on the health effects of wireless smart meters.
Did you know studies have proven that cell phone radiation detrimentally affects the protective layers surrounding your brain?
Now, in fact, cancer is not the main concern that I have. I'm really concerned about sperm count and about effects on pregnancy. I just got back from a conference in Turkey and Greece where we heard new studies showing that prenatal exposure to animals results in offspring that have smaller brains and more hyperactivity.
Wow. So you said you're concerned about sperm counts and fertility, but people don't generally stick their phones in their pants. Is this a systemic? I mean, if you're holding the phone, are you an antenna? Is your whole body an antenna, or is this people actually carry their phone in their pockets?
The phones are engineered today so that the antenna is usually out the back and it's symmetrical. So half of the radiation from that phone gets into whatever it's next to. I keep my phone on airplane mode right now and just I'm using it to show you this. There are ways to use phones more safely. I'm not telling you not to use phones because, of course, they can be useful. But I think everyone needs to use their phones a lot less than they do, and to know that distance is your friend, and if you talk less, you'll be better off. You can use the phone as long as you keep it away from your body, but in general, we're using phones for a lot of rather silly purposes.
The danger is real, very real. Should you quit using your cell phone? Let's be realistic. So what can you do? What should you do? How can you protect your family? How can you protect yourself?
So use it in speakerphone mode, for example?
Absolutely. Use it in speakerphone, use it with a headset, and understand that the World Health Organization reviewed the evidence on this with experts who were independent, and they concluded that cell phone radiation was in the same category as DDT and engine exhaust. Now, we take steps for DDT and engine exhaust. We won't give those things to children to play with.
Right. You know, when Teddy Kennedy got brain cancer, who knows? I mean, obviously, but there's a lot of people who are getting that brain cancer who are of the age to be the early adopters, not for this generation of phones, but for the much earlier ones. I remember having a phone back in the 80s that actually burned the skin on the palm of my thumb using the thing, which was right next to where the antenna was, one of those little pull-out antennas. Is it possible that they've gotten so much better that we don't have to worry, and it's really the people who were exposed 10 and 20 years ago who have to be concerned, or have we just gone from X-ray the foot to radium on the watch dial? And
well, you know, it's a very good question, and the answer is I don't know. You're absolutely right. The old phones were worse, and the people who use them the most, the realtors, the lawyers, the politicians, they are the first wave of damage that we're seeing. But I really think that brain cancer is the wrong question. We've got to stop asking about it, and we've got to start looking at the effects that we see on learning, on the nervous system, on some people who are very sensitive to this radiation and find it really incapacitating for long. A lot of people now are experiencing tinnitus, headaches, and even spells of dizziness that they can't fully understand. And it may turn out that these exposures are having effects on the nervous system that we don't really well understand.
This non-ionizing radiation.
Absolutely. It is non-ionizing, but it's quite dangerous over the long run, and we've got to do a better job of protecting ourselves. That's why we've created Environmental Health Trust, and please like us on Facebook, and I look forward to talking to you more about this on the radio.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure having you with us.
There may be another power in the world, but we will be the ultimate power.
Quite explicitly, the US and the EU are saying that they want these new trade agreements to form the blueprint, the template for all future trade deals. And that means they're rewriting the rules of the global economy, and that means for everybody.
Once signed, it will cement a key part of the US government's plan to create a new global bloc that will ensure the dominance of its largest companies. And to understand why, we need to go back to the 1950s.
See the USA in your Chevrolet. America is asking you to call. Drive your Chevrolet through the USA.
After the Second World War, the United States accounted for half of the world's economy. Its influence was unmatched by any country, and it was able to write the early rules of international trade to its advantage. The World Trade Organization was created in this context, and the US dictated rules that favored American business. But as economies like China and India joined the WTO, it became a more democratized arena, and the US found it harder to control its decision-making.
At the WTO, at its Doha rounds, India spoke up and Brazil spoke up, and the US lost control.
I think it's no use beating around the bush. This meeting has collapsed.
The US felt it needed a new strategy to maintain its global dominance. So in the classical American style, they went big. To bypass the WTO, they're creating the biggest international agreements that the world has ever seen. They're called the 3 Big T's. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP, and the Trade in Services Agreement, or TISA. And they're all being negotiated in secret right now.
We only found out when WikiLeaks was able to leak parts of them.
And what's interesting is when you look across all of these deals, whether it be TTIP, TPP or TISA, China is excluded, but also Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, they're all excluded because those are the emerging economies.
What is not often understood is that these agreements are part of a geopolitical war. This is a new war which is taking place between the United States and China. The United States is very scared of the rise of China, so it has moved to militarily encircle it through what is called the pivot to Asia, and now it's moving on to doing that economically.
The basic idea which comes across from reading US strategy papers is the construction of a new grand enclosure. And to put inside this grand enclosure, the United States, 51 other countries, 1.6 billion people, and 2/3 of global GDP. To integrate Latin America away from Brazil and towards the United States, to integrate Southeast Asia away from China and towards the United States, and to integrate Western Europe, pulling it away from Eurasia as a whole and towards the Atlantic.
Of the 3 big T's, WikiLeaks has revealed 4 chapters of the TPP, which affects 12 countries in the Americas and Southeast Asia. We also obtained and released the core text of TISA, which affects 52 countries, including the EU. But nearly all of TTIP is still secret.
Nobody knows about what's being negotiated in our name. So you have these far-reaching deals which are going to completely change the face of our economies and our societies, and yet even elected parliamentarians know nothing about it.
The world's biggest corporations don't have the same problem. They have been receiving VIP access from day one and have had abundant influence in the negotiations.
People, the likes of you and I, are excluded. Governments, to a great extent, are excluded. Those who are included are the multinational corporations.
These agreements are basically corporate ownership agreements. The funny thing about free trade agreements, as we understand them, is they often have nothing to do with trade in the sense of the mutual lowering of tariffs. What they're about is enshrining an investor rights regime in the respective countries and ensuring that corporations can run wild in the respective economies with very, very little regulation or impingement by government or authorities.
These treaties will have huge, huge implications for literally almost every critical issue that an individual citizen or community would care about: health, education, the environment, privacy, access to medicines. I mean, the list could go on.
One of the most criticised aspects is a system called the Investor State Dispute Settlement, or ISDS. It's a secretive international tribunal that allows companies to sue states over virtually anything that they can claim affects their investment.
If a protest affects their profits, they can sue. If laws affect their profits, they can sue. If new regulations might impact where or what they want to do with their money, they can sue.
This is a new power which will be handed over to US corporations to sue the governments of Europe in a parallel judicial system which is available to them alone. So people have no access to it, domestic firms have no access to it, governments have no access to it. It's just there for foreign investors, in this case, US corporations.
Based on ISDS history, critics argue that European state sovereignty and democracy are at serious risk. Previous lawsuits include Swedish company Vattenfall suing the German state for $3.7 billion for phasing out nuclear energy. British American Tobacco sued Australia for passing a law limiting cigarette advertising. The French company Veolia sued Egypt for raising the minimum wage.
What is so scary about this is that corporations want to lock in their power. So they not only want increased power, but they want to make it impossible for sovereign governments to reverse the changes which are going to give them power. So for example, with TTIP, if it passes with ISDS in it, the privatization of the National Health Service, which is happening in the UK, can never be reversed.
What is democratic about an enormous imposition of power on countries whose citizens have no way of knowing what's going on, of debating it, or influencing their government in its decision? That's anti-democratic.
The history of these agreements shows that they're very difficult to change unless people can see what's in them. And that's why they're kept secret. Because when the contents are revealed, it generates an opposition.
In a few moments, I will sign the North American Free Trade Act into law. NAFTA will tear down trade barriers between our three nations. It will create the world's largest trade zone and create 200,000 jobs in this country by 1995 alone. This agreement exchanges membership rights for China in the WTO for economic opportunities for America in China, for American businesses and American workers.
The agreement we're announcing today includes several important improvements and achieves what I believe trade deals must do. It's a win-win for both our countries. This deal is a win for American workers, for our farmers and ranchers. It will increase exports of American agricultural products.
So instead of having a race to the bottom for lower wages and worse working conditions and more abuse of our natural resources, this is a race to the top. It's not just good for our businesses, it's good for our workers.
WikiLeaks has had considerable success delaying the TPP and opening up the debate around it and the teaser by releasing the secret draft texts.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
But that was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the fourth industrial revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device, it gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain and enables us to really, truly be able to realize an identity that is aspirational.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain, on the genome, on biological aging. And when the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
We need a different economic model. And by that I don't mean capitalism versus communism. What I'm talking about is a shift in the system along the lines of the two big changes that happened in the 20th century, Keynesianism, with a much greater focus on health and education and the role of government working with business, and then a reaction against that in late century to neoliberalism, where the focus was on free markets, freedom of the individual, and getting governments out of the way. We need a shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet, that will live within planetary means, that will be fairer, and that will be focused as its key goal, not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being. And history tells us that a values shift is triggered by creation of a new story about how we want to live.
I see the circular economy as something which fits very closely with mankind's goal to be innovative and creative and to always progress. We can use asset tracking, we can use IT, we can use 3D printing to enable this different economic model to recover materials, feed them back into the economy, and really to decouple growth from the resource constraints we have.
The reason we live in cities is not different today than it was 10,000 years ago. Even if we have got networks connecting us, we still want to have places where we meet in person. Well, this means the place where we work and the place where we live are much closer to each other, a city where we don't need to have big supply chains in order to produce things, where many things can be sourced locally thanks to 3D printing and robotics. So if we're able to do something to transform cities, to make them more efficient, then the impact can be huge.
Think about the prospect of getting rid of plastics. We must not only be inspired or informed by nature, but actually use natural organisms with which to design products and building parts. Only instead of varying material properties, we're varying biological functionality.
Design is critical today because it's the first signal of human intention. So the question of adding quality to quantity, it isn't a matter of simply circulating things that are potentially toxic. It's circulating things that are safe and healthy for all generations. So the goal is no longer, I want to be less bad, less monotonous, less unsafe, less unjust. It's really about a diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, clean soil, clean energy.
Together we are fighting to preserve our fragile climate from irreversible damage and devastation of unthinkable proportions.
If we think about the original Industrial Revolution, it was an energy revolution. I like to think of it as a kind of bookending of a period in human history during which we used fossil fuels, and it worked very well for us for a long time. But now we have to bring that to an end. We have energy technologies that can power our civilization: solar, wind, biomass. So then the question is, well, how do we get grid integration? Maybe the wind is blowing in Denmark, the sun is shining in Germany, and now you can move that electricity through an integrated grid. You can supply energy to everyone who needs it, and you can supply energy at all times.
Walking around, you do see different stuff as far as like the body marriage line. They use a lot of things that help them lift up and move things to the car. You just sit there and, program something, and if it has its own set mind to go ahead and do everything. And then as humans, we just come in and take the extra step to help the technology.
It's not the cure-all for everything. There's definitely a lot of things where people perform the operation better, but certainly for the right applications, robotics are a huge improvement for the process.
The prediction of 5 million jobs lost by 2020 to technology is serious, but it's not the main question. Construction, manufacturing, services, public health and education, these industries will still exist. The main question is, what will be the future of work? How will we define work? How will we share the wealth?
From the viewpoint of the labor or jobs, now we really need new education or new training.
We're working with a World in Motion in FIRST Robotics, trying to encourage students from 3rd grade all the way up through the end of high school. We had students make sailboats, and then we had them race them, and so they could see how quickly they could move. And they immediately went back and started to say, oh, I saw what happened, I'm going to go change this or that. And that was 3rd graders.
I just given a prize to a kid of 18 years old that has discovered something really very, very unique. Came up with how to get better productivity and better yields for seeds of corn. And so he basically came with the idea that if you would perforate these seeds, you would get more food. And you think about it and say, but he didn't go to university. So how does he get all that knowledge? And he told me, I've been watching YouTube since the age of 12, and I'm so interested that I've seen everything about it. I've read everything about it. The world is really open to learning. The thing is, how do you give the incentive to your kids to do that?
It's this ability of digital technology to change outcomes, to truly empower people all over the world that can create a more equitable growth, because I think the world needs that.
Fourth industrial revolution has the potential to make inequalities visible and to make them less acceptable in the future, and hopefully to gather and garner political support to take the necessary decision to reduce the gap.
Humans have always been using tools, but because of the recent advances in technology, we're beginning to have machines that can augment us in all sorts of interesting ways.
I was the first person in the world to be able to voluntarily move my legs while stepping in a robot by exciting the nervous system using electrical stimulators directly onto the spine. We believe that a cure will be possible if enough of the right people have the will to fast-track a cure for paralysis.
We take two things from the patient. First, we take a three-dimensional X-ray and we extract the three-dimensional data out of that so we can make a perfectly shaped puzzle piece. And then we also take a sample of fat tissue from the patient so that we can extract the stem cells out of those. And we use those stem cells with this three-dimensional scaffold that we fabricate, and after 3 weeks we have a piece of living bone that's ready for implantation.
Being able to use genome editing to understand the genetic changes that lead to cancer, and technologies like drug delivery, getting molecules into particular types of cells. There's a lot of excitement about being able to move much more quickly on this disease.
One of the things that I think is so essential to free and open societies is freedom of thought. And up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotion, we have to create a space that enables people to think freely, to think divergent thoughts, to think creative thoughts. And in a society where people fear having those thoughts, the likelihood of being able to enjoy progress is significantly diminished.
We need to take responsibility at every level of society, from the individual and the personal to the institutional to the global, to adapt to these technological challenges and changes which are redefining what it means to be human, what it means to work, what it means to be completely embedded in this world.
People always ask me if I'm an optimist or a pessimist. The technology exists, but how do we get it and implement it at the scale we need at a price that people around the world can afford?
Even though we have everyday problems we have to solve, we have to find a way to lay the foundations for the innovations of tomorrow.
We thank you for watching this video and ask you to spread the news. Put this video on your social network or link to it so that you can be part of the anonymous movement. Together we are strong. Together we are anonymous.